Welcome back to The Explainer. I'm your digital study buddy, and today we are tackling a massive, absolutely crucial topic from your syllabus, Chapter 6, The Digital Divide. We're going to break down the theory, look at the real-world data, and then we're running a full A-star exam strategy masterclass. We'll use some highly effective frameworks to make sure you know exactly how to secure those top marks. Okay, let's dive right in. So, I want you to imagine something for a second. What actually happens when you are completely unplugged from the modern world? Seriously, think about trying to navigate your school assignments, checking your bank balance, or just keeping up with your friends, but you have zero internet and absolutely no smartphone access. For most of us, that sounds like a total nightmare, right? But for millions of people out there, this isn't some hypothetical what-if scenario. It's just their everyday reality. And that brings us to this staggering number right here. Boom, 5.3 million. Back in 2018, a survey by the Office for National Statistics revealed that 5.3 million Britons had either literally never gone online or they hadn't used the internet in the last 3 months. You know, this isn't just a minor glitch in the system, it's a massive, real-world issue, affecting about 10% of the adult UK population. Okay, let's move into our first section, defining the digital divide. Let's see how this builds into our course syllabus. The official definition goes like this. The digital divide is the gap between people who can access and use modern technology, like smartphones, tablets, and high-speed internet, and those who simply cannot. Now, the absolute key takeaway here is that this divide, it's not just about owning a piece of plastic and metal. It's equally about having the broadband infrastructure to connect that device, and, crucially, having the digital skills to actually use it effectively. I mean, think about it. If you hand someone a top-tier laptop, but they have no Wi-Fi and don't know how to open a web browser, they are still firmly on the wrong side of the digital divide. So, moving on to our next section, causes of the gap. Why does this divide actually exist in the first place? Well, there are a few key culprits we need to talk about. First up is a straightforward lack of infrastructure. We're talking about places where fiber optic cables or mobile masts just literally haven't been installed. Second is the economics of it all. High-performance computers and expensive wireless data plans just aren't affordable for everybody. Then we've got geographical barriers. It's incredibly difficult and very expensive to lay cables through a mountain range or out to really remote rural communities. And finally, there's a very human factor. The fear of IT and a lack of basic digital skills. For some people, new tech feels totally overwhelming rather than helpful. And if we look at the timeline on this graph from 2011 to 2018, it brilliantly illustrates the trend. Those orange bars represent the millions of adults not using the internet. The numbers are definitely dropping, which is fantastic news. But look over at the far right. Even in 2018, a stubborn 10% of the population still remained digitally excluded. Basically, the easy-to-reach people got connected, but those compounding causes we just talked about, like geography, wealth, and skills, are keeping that final group completely unplugged. All right, moving into our next section, real-world effects. Because, how does this actually impact people's daily lives? The digital divide rapidly becomes a social divide. In healthcare, being offline means missing out on super convenient online prescriptions or digital health records. In education, students can't access online resources or upload their homework, giving a massive unfair advantage to the kids who can. When it comes to employment, modern job hunting literally requires searching online boards and emailing CVs. If you can't do that, you're entirely shut out of the best opportunities. And for everyday services, people offline often end up paying more for things like train tickets simply because they miss out on online-only advance discounts. Being offline literally costs you money. Next section, who is most affected? Let's identify the specific demographics highlighted by the Cambridge syllabus. It's really important to understand that the divide doesn't impact everyone equally. The most vulnerable groups include older adults, rural and remote communities, individuals with lower education levels, lower socioeconomic households, and people living in less economically developed countries, or LEDCs. Basically, age, geography, and wealth are the biggest predictors for sure of whether you are digitally included or excluded. Let's zoom in on the age factor for a second. Looking closely at this data breaking down internet non-users in the UK, notice that bottom row? By 2018, a massive 55% of all internet non-users were aged 75 or over. And why is that? Often, it's driven by a real fear of making mistakes with new, overly complex devices, or a sheer lack of physical accessibility features on tiny little touchscreens. And here is the geographical divide in action. Looking at tech ownership in the USA, check out the home broadband section on the left. 75% of urban adults have home broadband, compared to only 63% in rural areas. Why? Well, telecommunications companies are businesses. It just isn't profitable for them to spend millions laying miles of fiber optic cables out to just a few sparse houses in a rural valley. So those rural communities, they just get left behind.
Okay, let's pivot to our next section, bridging the gap. How do governments and organizations actually solve this?
Fixing the divide definitely requires a multi-layered approach. It means funding not just cheaper internet, but massive digital literacy programs so people actually know how to use it once they're online. For rural areas, we can use innovative hardware solutions like Powerline Communication, or PLC, which actually sends internet data through existing electrical cables. How cool is that? On the software side, developers need to design apps with accessibility aids, like text-to-speech or high-contrast modes for older adults. And finally, organizations can step in by distributing refurbished computers to low-income students or schools in LEDCs. Right, we've covered the theory. Now it is time for our final section, the A-Star Exam Strategy Masterclass. Time to pivot from concepts to the actionable techniques that will actually secure you top marks. Grab your notes. Let's do this. So phase 1, avoiding the definition trap. When an exam asks you to explain the impact of the digital divide on, say, a hospital, the single biggest mistake students make is just dumping a memorized generic definition of the digital divide onto the page. Look at the flawed answer example here. It's just a generic list. You will absolutely lose precious marks if you don't link the core concept directly to the specific scenario they gave you in the prompt. So, how do you structure the perfect long-form answer? You want to focus on the PEL plus J answer framework. This is literally your ultimate tool. P, make your point clearly. E, provide evidence from the scenario. E, explain the why and the how. L, link it back to the specific context of the question. And J, provide a justified judgment at the very end. If you follow this structure step by step, you guarantee that you are hitting every single requirement on the examiner's mark scheme. Now, another truly essential concept for pulling in top marks is scenario anchoring. This is an absolute mark magnet. Whenever you write an answer, anchor it to the exact context of the exam prompt. If the question is about a rural school, don't talk generally about users and devices. Talk specifically about students, teachers, and the lack of high-speed fiber infrastructure in the village. You have to use the specific terminology relevant to that exact scenario to pull in those extra application marks. Finally, let's wrap up our strategy session with a quick look at some examiner insights. Notice the warning about avoiding common errors. Eliminate vague wording. Do not just say it's harder for them. Actually say it restricts their ability to access online job portals, leading to limited employment opportunities. Ensure your answers are mapped directly to the technical methodology you've learned in this explainer. Be precise, be clear, and trust the framework. Which brings us to a final thought to leave you with today. As technology advances at lightning speed, from basic broadband right into the era of artificial intelligence, will the digital divide ever truly close? Or is it just going to evolve into a totally new kind of gap? Definitely something to think about as you continue your studies. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. Keep practicing those exam techniques, stay focused, and best of luck on your exams. You've got this.